She was 19 when her own father put her up for auction. Not as an animal, not as a slave, but as merchandise. The girl, whose name wasn't even important, changed hands for $26. The buyer was a lonely widower who earned just enough in the mine to stay alive. This story is about how something beautiful can be born in the most terrible circumstances, and how one person's decision can change another person's fate forever. The story began in 1883, in a desolate small settlement in Colorado. At 19, Sarah McBride had already experienced all the bitterness of becoming an adult. Her father, Patrick McBride, was a drunk and a gambler who spent more on whiskey than he earned. Her mother, Margaret, was sick and had been bedridden for months, slowly dying of tuberculosis. The family's debts had piled so high that Patrick could no longer pay rent for their small cabin. Loan sharks knocked on their door more and more frequently, threatening to take everything from them. Only one path remained open for Patrick, selling his daughter. One Saturday afternoon, Patrick McBride led Sarah to the town square. He placed her on a wooden platform and started shouting to passers-by, "Young, strong girl for sale. Can cook, clean, work. She can be yours for $25. The shame and humiliation showed on Sarah's face. Her eyes were teary, but she didn't cry. She knew if she cried, her father would beat her. The townspeople stood around them, some giggling, others shaking their heads disapprovingly. But no one said a word. Then Thomas Wright appeared, a 45-year-old widower who had lost his wife to an epidemic 6 months ago. Thomas wasn't a wealthy man. He worked in the nearby silver mine and earned every penny. He was lonely and desperate, but when he saw Sarah on that platform, something changed in him. Thomas knew this wasn't right. He knew that a person couldn't be sold like a piece of cattle. Still, he stepped closer and asked Patrick McBride, "What's the least you'd take for her?" Patrick answered immediately, $26, but not a cent less. Thomas looked at Sarah's face. The girl looked at him, and in her eyes he saw such desperation as he had never seen on a human face before. Thomas knew that if he didn't do something right now, this girl would be lost. He took out his wallet and counted out $26. This was all his savings that he had collected over 2 years. He gave the money to Patrick McBride, who immediately pocketed it. "The girl is yours," said Patrick, and, without saying a word to his daughter, walked off to the bar. Thomas and Sarah were left alone in the town square. The man didn't know what to say. Finally, he just asked, "What's your name?" "Sarah," the girl answered quietly. "Sarah, I'm Thomas. I know this is a very strange situation for both of us, but I want you to know that I didn't buy you for the reasons others might think." Sarah lifted her head and looked into Thomas's eyes. For the first time in years, she saw warmth in an adult man's gaze. Thomas led Sarah to his small house at the edge of town. It was a simple but clean place. "This house is yours too now," said Thomas. "You have your own room where you can sleep. No one will hurt you here." Sarah didn't understand. But you bought me." Thomas sat at the table and looked at her seriously. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. No one can own another person. What your father did was terrible, but I didn't give that money to buy you. I did it to save you from this situation. Then, am I free?" Sarah asked uncertainly. "You are completely free. If you want to leave tomorrow, you can leave. If you want to stay, you can stay. If you want to work, work. If not, then don't. It's your decision." Sarah couldn't sleep that night. For the first time in years, she felt safe. When she woke up the next morning, Thomas was no longer home. He went to work in the mine. A note waited for her on the table, breakfast on the stove. "If you need anything, ask the neighbors." Sarah decided to stay. Not because anything obligated her to, but because she felt Thomas was honest with her. In the following weeks, Sarah gradually discovered a completely new world. Thomas came home from work every evening and they talked. Thomas told her about the town, the people, the world. And Sarah slowly learned to laugh again. Thomas taught Sarah how to read and write. In the evenings, they sat at the table by lamplight, and Thomas patiently showed her the letters. Sarah was smart and learned quickly. Within a few weeks, she could read simple sentences. But the biggest change happened in Sarah's heart. For the first time in years, she felt important to someone. Thomas never yelled at her, never hit her, never humiliated her. Instead, he spoke to her as if she were an equal human being. One evening, Sarah asked Thomas, "Why did you do this for me? Why did you save me?" Thomas was silent for a long time, then answered, "Because when my wife died, I thought my life would never have meaning again. But when I saw you on that platform, I realized there was something I could do. I could help someone." "But I'm not your wife," Sarah said. "No, you're not. And I don't want you to be, unless you want to. But if you ever decide you'd like to be, I'll be the happiest man in the world." Sarah touched Thomas's hand. "I think I already want to." Time passed. A special relationship developed between Sarah and Thomas. Not the relationship between buyer and commodity, but between two people who chose each other. Sarah learned to sing, and in the evenings she sang for Thomas. Thomas taught Sarah chess, and they spent hours playing. If you've started to appreciate what you've heard so far, you can pause for a moment and subscribe to the channel. This helps us share more true stories from the Wild West with you. By spring, Sarah had completely changed. From a shy, broken girl, she became a confident, happy woman. And Thomas realized that he couldn't live without Sarah anymore. One April evening, Thomas asked for Sarah's hand. Not like others usually do, but as equals should. "Sarah, I would like you to be my wife, but only if you want to." Sarah said yes. Their wedding was simple. The town's priest married them in the small church. A few neighbors were present as witnesses. Sarah wore a white dress that Thomas bought for her. It was the first new dress she had ever received. But the real turning point of the story came after this. A few months after the wedding, Patrick McBride returned to town, drunk, angry, and penniless. When he learned that Sarah had married Thomas, he became furious. One evening, Patrick broke into Thomas's house. Sarah was home alone. Thomas hadn't returned from the mine yet. Patrick started screaming, "You little whore! How dare you get married without my permission?" Sarah wasn't afraid of him anymore. "You sold me, Father. You have no right to me." Patrick became enraged and tried to hit Sarah. But at that moment, Thomas walked through the door. He saw what was happening and grabbed Patrick's arm in one motion. "Get out of here," Thomas said quietly, but in a tone that meant more than any shouting. Patrick tried to resist, but Thomas was stronger. He threw Patrick out of the house and told him, "If I see you here again, I'll call the sheriff." Patrick McBride never bothered them again. Sarah and Thomas lived happily. Sarah became pregnant, and the following spring their first child was born, a girl. They christened her Mary in memory of Thomas's deceased wife. But the strongest moment came when Sarah first held her own child in her arms. That's when she truly understood the difference between love and possession. She would never sell this child. She would never put them up for sale. This child would be free and could make their own decisions in life. Thomas and Sarah raised 4 more children. They taught each of them to read and write. They taught each of them that all people are equal and no one can own another person. In her old age, Sarah often thought back to the day when her father sold her. At the time, she thought it was the end of the world. but in reality it was the beginning of her new life. Thomas died at 77 in Sarah's arms. His last words were, "Thank you for making me happy." Sarah lived another 10 years without Thomas. Her grandchildren visited often and always asked her to tell them the story of how Grandpa saved her. Sarah always ended the story the same way. Love isn't when someone buys you. Love is when someone sets you free. In her final days, Sarah still whispered Thomas's name. On her gravestone they wrote, "She was free, and she set others free." But perhaps the most surprising thing in the whole story is that Patrick McBride, who had sold his daughter back then, died homeless in another city at the end of his life. No one cried for him. No one remembered him. While Sarah and Thomas's love still lives on today in those who heard this story and learned from it that true love always sets you free, it will never imprison you.